We're going to take you straight to the Middle East this morning because there's breaking news out of the Knesset this morning, with Israel's parliament passing controversial legislation targeting the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency. The new laws will block UNRWA from operating on Israeli soil.
The UN had warned the bills would make it impossible for UNRWA to implement its mandate, effectively cutting off aid to millions of refugees in Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Our Middle East correspondent Matt Doran is in Jerusalem for us now. Matt, explain what's happening where you are.
Bridget, good morning. That bill has just gone through the Knesset, and there is a second bill which is still being debated dealing with a similar sort of idea here, trying to outlaw UNRWA from being able to operate in this part of the world. UNRWA is the organisation set up by the United Nations decades ago to provide aid to the Palestinian population, and this decision by the Knesset to outlaw it, to effectively ban it from operating in Israeli territory, will impact the West Bank, and it will also impact war-ravaged Gaza, where UNRWA has been so vital in providing that support to the many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have been displaced throughout the course of the Israel-Gaza war. This is the culmination, I guess you could say, of a concerted campaign by Israeli politicians, the Netanyahu government and other members of the Israeli Knesset, the local parliament here, to discredit UNRWA and its operations. This has stretched back many years, but in the wake of the October 7 attacks, Israel made a number of accusations about UNRWA staff, accusing them of aiding Hamas in those attacks and also working with Hamas in the aftermath. There have been investigations which have led to the dismissal of some staff, but the exoneration of others. And the international community had certainly been urging the Israeli parliament not to push through this legislation, including Australia. The Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, signing a statement alongside a number of other foreign ministers, including those from France, from Canada and South Korea over the weekend, and the United Kingdom for that matter, urging Israeli lawmakers not to go down this path. But it has been the decision that has been reached by the Israeli Knesset this evening, and it was an overwhelming vote in the end. Of the 120 members of the Knesset, 92 voted in favour of this legislation, which will now come into force in the next 90 days. Lawmakers say that there are other agencies, other organisations which could provide aid to the Palestinian population, but it is worth pointing out that at this stage we do not have any details as to who will step in to enter that void that has been left by this decision. I know we heard from UNICEF, another UN agency, a short time ago here on News Breakfast. We have also heard from the boss of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini. He's just taken to social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, and I just want to bring you some of his comments. He says that the vote by the Knesset against UNRWA this evening is unprecedented and sets a dangerous precedent. It opposes the UN Charter and violates the State of Israel's obligations under international law. This is the latest in the ongoing campaign to discredit UNRWA and delegitimise its role towards providing human development assistance and services to Palestinian refugees. And these bills will only deepen the suffering of Palestinians, especially in Gaza, where people have been going through more than a year of sheer hell. So this decision only happening in the last last hour or so, and we'll wait to see how that second bill is playing out, and also in reaction and responses which will come from around the world as this news starts to trickle through.
Yeah, we will chase reaction here in Australia, Matt, from the government, of course, as well. And Matt, tell us about what we've learned about the progress of ceasefire talks, because Egypt had put a refreshed proposal forward.
An interim proposal, very early steps in a ceasefire and hostage deal proposal to deal with the ongoing war in Gaza. These talks resuming in the Qatari capital of Doha, and Egypt's proposal was sort of the first step to getting a lasting ceasefire in Gaza, and it was for a 2-day ceasefire that would allow for the release of 4 Israeli hostages by Hamas and a group of Palestinian prisoners by Israel. So that is nowhere near what is needed to bring this conflict to an end, but Egypt certainly putting that forward as a first step. And we have been hearing reports through Saudi Arabian media today that Hamas officials have voiced some support for that proposal. It's not clear whether or not Israel is in the same boat there. And we'd have to say that we've seen this story before a number of times throughout the course of this conflict. Ceasefire and hostage negotiations beginning, early indications that there may be some movement towards a breakthrough, only for those talks to falter very, very quickly. So many people would be welcoming the fact that these negotiations are happening in Doha, but a lot of scepticism as to whether or not they will actually bring about any sort of lasting change in Gaza.
Yeah, that's right. Matthew, thank you very much for keeping us updated from Jerusalem.
Now, an 11th hour pay deal that's headed off industrial action could well make teachers in New South Wales the envy of teachers across the nation. The union has secured a 10% pay rise over 3 years, more student-free days and the right to disconnect after 3 p.m. Our reporter Miles Holbrook-Walk joins us now from Sydney with more. Miles, g'day again. What else will teachers be getting with this deal?
Well, James, along with a 10% pay increase across 3 years, it'll largely be doled out in wage increases of 3% annually, as well as top-ups of superannuation of about 0.5% in 24 and 25. There'll also be the potential to have cost of living payment relief, and that is negotiated through an interesting clause that essentially says that if inflation tracks at 4.5% or higher, teachers then are activating this $1,000, which potentially 3 times off. It's one off per year, but you could have it each year in the bargaining agreement. So teachers potentially receiving $3,000 in payments each year if inflation tracks at 4.5% or higher. There's also some really crucial negotiations, as the union, the New South Wales Teachers Federation, has described, around securing more pupil-free days and ensuring that there's also time for teachers outside of the classroom delivering lessons to students to also ensure that they have more time to manage workloads, as well as a body set up to monitor that, ensuring schools and the education department aren't contacting teachers unnecessarily outside of regular work hours. This is very similar to new federal legislation that has come in around the right to disconnect, but has some nuances to the New South Wales context. But broadly, what's been interesting is that Henry Rajendra, the leader of the New South Wales Teachers Federation, has just hot off the heels of winning over a major pay fight, has put the federal government on notice, saying that he wants to see fully funded public schools to ensure better quality of education to public schools.
This is the opportunity for the Prime Minister to step up, for Anthony Albanese to give our schools the best chance to be that Prime Minister our public schools deserve. All we want is the best outcomes for our children, no matter how poor or wealthy they are, no matter where they're located throughout the country. Our children matter. We want Anthony Albanese to join us in that commitment to ensure that this nation's public schools and its students get the best chance in life.
So that's Henry Rajendra talking about federal funding of schools. This is different to the state government deal that's already been agreed to between teachers and the state government now. That would also include a real focus on looking at the funding divide between public and private schools. So, James, still plenty to be debated in the education space.
All right, Miles, thank you for that. Bridget, he's got a fabulous moustache, Miles. We're
We
so
love
lucky to have
Miles.
so many good young reporters around the country.
Big Miles fans right here on News Breakfast. We're going to take you to the United Nations Security Council. Now, these are live pictures from the United Nations Security Council. A very big day there, as Israel's parliament, the Knesset, has given approval, bipartisan approval, of a bill banning its activities of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA. Those activities will be banned in Israel and occupied East Jerusalem, calling the move outrageous. The Australian government had urged Israel not to do this, and UNRWA spokesperson James has just said it's outrageous that a member state of the United Nations is working to dismantle a UN agency, which also happens to be the largest responder in the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
And we'll, of course, have more on that story throughout the morning and indeed throughout the day on the ABC News channel. Now, to other news, and senior ministers are defending the Prime Minister after reports he sought free flight upgrades directly from the former Qantas boss, Alan Joyce. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is under scrutiny after 9 newspapers reported he liaised directly with Mr Joyce over upgrades for his personal travel, including when he was Transport Minister. Many Labor frontbenchers like Bill Shorten are defending the Prime Minister, but the opposition leader Peter Dutton has questioned if it is appropriate. The Prime Minister says all of his upgrades have been disclosed.
A new youth detention facility is on the cusp of opening in Darwin, with Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro announcing it'll accept adult prisoners as soon as this week. The long-delayed opening of the facility in Holtz comes during a prison population boom, which has seen jails swell to record capacity in Darwin and Alice Springs. It will mean authorities can shift youth detainees out of the infamous Don Dale Detention Centre, freeing up space for an extra 50 adult prisoners. A Royal Commission called for Don Dale to shut down in 2017 after findings of systemic failures.
Power has been restored after yet another outage in far western New South Wales last night. About 1,800 properties in communities outside of Broken Hill were affected by the more than hour-long outage. It comes nearly 2 weeks after a severe storm knocked down transmission towers in the area. Essential Energy says it is unclear what caused last night's outage.
And we've got another breaking development out of the Middle East. Israel's parliament has approved a second piece of legislation to cut ties with the main UN provider of aid to Gaza and to designate it a terror organisation, crippling the agency as the humanitarian crisis in Gaza mounts. The bill prohibits ties between Israeli officials and the agency and strips its staff of their legal immunities. It follows an earlier bill that bans all activity of the agency, known as UNRWA, on Israeli soil. We'll bring you reaction as it comes in.